so hopefully you guys have understood the categories and have been able to apply those categories to your mind. You know what? I'm not sharing the screen.
Are we still on Wi-Fi or are we on?
I don't know. Sorry guys, this has come across a little bit unprofessionally. I've been talking the whole time, but I didn't share my screen. So yeah, Sirius can assist with a whole lot of things. Sirius today and send us an email so that we can assist you. So last week we covered all the categories. Primarily the people attending here are from the food manufacturing categories, which is typically category C, category C4. And yeah, if you're outside of that, just make reference to the guidance document. I'll show you where to download that now. But today we're going to look at the additional requirements. There are 18 requirements in total, and we're going to cover the first 9. So if you haven't done it yet, go to the FSSC website and download using this link. Or go to fssc.com. Under the schemes drop down, download the additional requirements, and there's a whole lot of documents there. You can probably download them all and just use the ones that are applicable to you.
We need to switch over to the Wi-Fi. It's very bad. There's a bad lag on our side.
Guys, we've just had some technical difficulty. We've been hotspotting using the network, and we need to switch over to Wi-Fi quickly. So that should be better.
So now, Siobhan, we have like 18 additional requirements. We have 18 additional requirements.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, it's connected. Can you hear me now? So yes, all 18 additional requirements, and today we're going to cover the first 9. Can you hear me now? So getting into these requirements, the first requirement that they require us to do is the management of services and purchase material. This has been in the system for quite some time. So really what they've done this year is they've added a section E for category I, but the rest pretty much remains the same. They just included the other categories. So just to go through this requirement, the first thing is any organization shall ensure that where laboratory analysis services are used for verifying and validating food safety, so that's things like your microbiology or your allergens, that those labs that you use must be conducted by a competent laboratory. Competence is always an interesting discussion that we have, because the definition of competence can be interpreted differently from a variety of different bodies. In South Africa, that means having SANAS accreditation in your laboratory, and that includes method being validated by SANAS. So all the methods need to be suitably accredited by a SANAS accredited laboratory. And they talk here specifically about international standards such as ISO 17025, which is your laboratory standard. I'm definitely sure. Can someone just indicate that they can see everything that we're presenting? Okay, thank you, Tabanga. I saw a raised hand there. Thank you very much. So Category F2 has been included. F2 was that whole e-trading, e-commerce. So e-commerce must also look at their managed services and purchase material. The organization shall have a documented procedure for procurement in emergency situations to ensure that products still conform to specified requirements and the supplier has been evaluated. So this whole supplier quality assurance, it remains the same. It remains what we'd normally be doing. We have to evaluate, we have to approve, and in the event of emergency situations, you can't just buy something. You actually have to go through that approval process before you procure in the event of an emergency. For clause number C, just incorporated this extra C0. C0, if you remember, is a new category that they've added for processing. So the clause actually just remains the same. The organization shall have a policy for the procurement of animal, fish, and seafood that are subject to control of prohibited substances. Example, pharmaceuticals, veterinary medicines, heavy metals, etc. So this is very similar to what we've done in the past. I just made sure they've reflected all their categories include this additional requirement. For the food chain categories C, D, I, F2, G, and K, the following additional requirements apply. They've obviously deleted specifics regarding technical specifications because that has been defined in the category section. The organization shall establish, implement, and maintain a review process for raw materials and finished specifications to ensure continued compliance with food safety, quality, legal, and customer requirements. So you'll notice, remember last week we talked that the whole FSSC thing fell away, now it's just FSSC, but they've brought in the quality aspect here as an additional requirement. So the focus on quality is almost just as important as safety. So within this additional requirement, we need to make sure we have a review process of all our services and purchase materials, and that includes any of these food safety, quality, legal, and customer requirements for both finished products and raw materials. We have to review it. It doesn't say annually, so one must specify the time within your procedure, and that's dependent on risk, dependent on the nature of the product, and dependent on the changes that might happen. For food category I is the production of food packaging and packaging material. There's an additional clause here. The organization shall establish criteria related to the use of recycled packaging as a raw material input into the production of finished packaging material and ensure that relevant legal and customer requirements can be met. It's really looking at additional recycled packaging and the safety of recycled packaging and making sure that we don't cause some sort of contamination risk by using inferior recycled packaging material. Right. The second additional requirement is product labeling and printed material. You can see they've elaborated a lot in this clause. It's applicable to all food chain categories. There used to be two A and B clause, now we've got C and D, and C and D has been elaborated considerably. So A talks about the organization ensuring that finished products are labeled according to the applicable statutory and regulatory requirements in the country of intended sale. That's always been the case. So if you're exporting to Japan or exporting to Russia, you need to make sure that you have complied with what's required in those countries, including allergen and customer specific requirements. Where a product is unlabeled, all relevant product information shall be made available to ensure the use of the food by the consumer or the customer. So it's the whole intended use and safe use. If you need to cook it, the cooking instructions must be on it. Then they've added, where a claim is made on the product label or packaging, the organization shall maintain evidence of validation to support the claim and shall have verification systems in place, including traceability and mass balance, to ensure product integrity is maintained. This is just sort of giving a bit more meat to whatever goes onto labels. I think South Africa's labeling regulations are quite specific already, which means we have to do it. And the new labeling regulations are getting even more pedantic with this. So I think our regulations almost support what is required here. Obviously, if we are going to be exporting, we need to look at where we're exporting to and considering what those countries might require. If there's no requirement from a country in terms of labeling, then we're going to have to do this anyway. And one of the good examples that I thought about this is if someone said it's cold pressed olive oil, we have to validate and have evidence in our system to show that it is actually cold pressed olive oil. If there's any sort of question there, then we need to make sure that we are sure of whatever that claim might be. And they talk there as examples, allergens, nutritional. So if it's free from gluten, we need to validate that it's free from gluten. If it's got high in fat or low in fat, that's a nutritional content claim. We have to have evidence to support that it's low in fat. Method of production, cold pressed oil or something along those lines. Chain of custody and raw material status. If we talk about organic raw materials, organic chicken, is it organic? We need evidence to support that it is organic. So it's just making sure that we've got evidence to say what we're doing. For food chain category I is food packaging material again. So this section D is only for food packaging material and the people that are manufacturing packaging material. Artwork management and print control procedures shall be established and implemented to ensure the printed material meets applicable customer and legal requirements. The procedure shall address the following as a minimum. If you manufacture packaging, specifically printed packaging, we have to have some sort of approval of artwork standard or master sample. It has to be approved. There needs to be a process to manage the changes to artwork and print specifications, and to manage obsolete artwork and printing materials. The approval of each print run against the agreed standard or master sample. So we can't just do it, you have to approve it. There has to be this process to make sure that we're doing it correctly and that it is correct. And then they need to have some sort of process in order to detect and identify printing errors during the run, process to ensure effective segregation of different print variants, and a process to account for any unused printed product. The big thing about unused printed product is to make sure that we don't have anything that could end up in the fraudulent market or end up going somewhere else in the chain. On a side note, most of us are probably in the manufacturing space and we all have to worry about labels and approval of labels. This section here would be a very good set of principles which we use to build our own labeling, internal labeling requirements, because we want to know that our label manufacturers have actually put some sort of process in place to make sure that they don't give us inferior labels. If we say to them the label must be like this, we just make sure that the labels are like that and not something else. So it might be a good idea from an SQA perspective that as we manage our labeling manufacturers to force them to put some of these things in place. Right, the third additional requirement is food defense. You'll notice that the clauses are pretty similar. They've only really added section D, so it's all the same, but they've rewritten everything. They've put a little bit more meat into it. So the first thing we have to do with food defense is we shall do it. The organization shall do a threat assessment. We must conduct and document a food defense threat assessment. It has to be on a piece of paper or in electronic format. It must be documented. It must be based on a defined methodology. This is where life becomes a little bit difficult, because how do we define a methodology? We need a procedure, and that procedure must be based on something. We need to have some sort of research which allows us to create a method that's written into our procedure, and that's the procedure we follow to do the threat assessment. And this method that we define needs to identify and evaluate potential risks. Not potential risks, potential threats. So we don't just say, oh, the gate is open, or a thief is in here, or unauthorized entry. We have to evaluate this threat. We have to assign some sort of likelihood, severity, some sort of threat model to say that this is a high threat or this is a low threat. And we evaluate the threat linked to the process and product within the scope of the organization. So we're not only looking at the facility, we're not only looking at the equipment, we're also looking at products. So this is where the whole tamper evidence comes in. So once the product leaves our facility, is it in a locker truck? Is the product tamper evidence? Can people open it and tamper with it before it gets to the consumer? Then obviously we're looking at the internal processes, whether it's the transport of the raw materials to you or it's the handling of the product and process while we're manufacturing the final product. Lastly, we must develop and implement appropriate mitigation measures for the significant tasks or the significant threat. And this is an interesting one because what is significant? Well, it depends what the threat is. Are all threats significant? Not necessarily. So we need a model to identify significant threats. As we would in HACCP, we have to worry about significant hazards, which get taken through the decision tree. So our methodology must specify what's significant and what's not significant. If it's not significant, we don't need mitigation measures. If it is significant, we need to have appropriate mitigation measures. The whole point of that is to ensure that we have some sort of control of the things that matter, the things that need to be controlled. Once we've done this analysis and we've identified the appropriate measures for significant threats, we need to draft a food defense plan, and that defense plan must be documented. That document must be based on the threats that have been identified. We have to specify the mitigation measures, so that's sort of within this framework. And we need to verify those procedures. We need to verify that whatever we say is going to be implemented is actually working and in place and will reduce the risk. The whole idea of this is that we've got a significant threat, we put a mitigation measure in place for that threat, and that mitigation measure takes this threat from being significant to being not significant. That's the basis of this, and we have to verify that it works. We have to have some sort of verification in place that it does actually reduce that threat to a non-significant status. This food defense plan shall be implemented and supported by the organization's food safety management system. This is not a standalone thing, it's all within the system. The plan shall comply with applicable legislation, cover the processes and products within the scope of the organization, and be kept up to date. Being kept up to date is a very vague way of saying if it's still appropriate, that's good, but we probably have to review it and just make sure that it is still appropriate. It must always be up to date. So if there's any changes, we must update it. We probably have to review it to make sure that any missed changes are actually fixed. And then the last section, or last clause of this additional requirement, letter D, for food chain category F2, so that's your e-commerce, brokering and trading. In addition to doing all of this, your brokers, traders and e-commerce organizations need to ensure that their suppliers have a food defense plan in place. The whole thing there is that you can't just assume, but you actually have to have something formally in place if you're doing e-commerce to make sure that your suppliers are in control. Food fraud, the additional requirement number 4, vulnerability assessment. You'll see that this layout is very similar again to food defense. Not much has changed. They've just added a few more words to give it a bit more body and to be a bit more descriptive with what's needed. Your organization shall conduct and document a food fraud vulnerability assessment. That needs to be based on a defined methodology. So again, we need to have a method. That method must come from somewhere. The method needs to be specific. And it needs to identify and assess potential vulnerabilities and develop appropriate mitigation measures for significant vulnerabilities. So it's very similar. What you do for food defense is very similar to food fraud in the way we do it. We have to assess the vulnerabilities. What are they? How significant are they? If they're significant, we need to have measures in place to reduce the significance so that the vulnerability is reduced and does not affect the product. And the assessment shall cover all processes and products within the scope of the organization. So anything that could be done on a process side which could contribute to some sort of food fraud, we need to consider that, as well as the product. Once we've assessed the vulnerabilities and we've identified the significance and we've defined the mitigation measures, we need to document a mitigation plan, or food fraud mitigation plan, based on the output of this assessment. And this plan will specify the mitigation measures and verification procedures. So once again, we have to verify how this is going to be implemented and planned and all working together. The food fraud mitigation plan shall be implemented and supported by the organization's system, food safety management system, and the plan shall comply with applicable legislation, cover the processes and products within the scope of the organization, and be kept up to date. So again, this is about everything within your organization to make sure all vulnerabilities are reduced and eliminated. For the e-commerce brokering and trading guide, in addition to making sure that food fraud doesn't happen on site, they have to ensure that their suppliers have these mitigation plans in place. For additional requirement number 5, logo use, this is, it's pretty much the same as what it used to be. We're talking about solely certified organizations, not the certified bodies and training organizations. They've got their own requirements for logo use now. But for certified organizations, you shall use the logo for marketing activities only, such as printed matter, websites, and other promotional material. In case of using the logo, the certified organization shall request a copy of the latest logo from the certification body. The big thing there is they want to make sure that if they've changed their logo, you've changed it and reflects the current logo, not the old logo. Color specifications are all the same. They've just indicated that, they've indicated where you're not allowed to use the logo, and you're not allowed to use it on a product. You're not allowed to use it in its labeling of the product, in the packaging of the product, or on your certificate of analysis or certificates of conformance. So if you put the logo in your letterhead and your letterhead is sent out as your certificate of analysis, you need to remove the logo from your letterhead. A COA or a COC cannot have the FSSC logo on it. And it can't be in any other manner that implies FSSC 22000 approves a product, process, or service, and where exclusions to the scope of certification apply. So if you've got an exclusion within your scope, you can't sort of manipulate it that the logo seems to show that the exclusion is certified. The exclusions cannot, there must be no ambiguity regarding any exclusions in the logo. And most importantly, not on your certificate of analysis. So we want to make sure that we're not verifying a product, we're verifying an organizational system. Here's where the mouthful starts. Thank you, Rihanna, for my water. 6. Additional requirement 6. The management of allergens, applicable to all food training categories. If you look at section number 8, they've included category D, which is animal feed and animal food production. So all food chain categories have to look at this level of detail when they're managing their allergen risks. First, you need to have a list of the allergens handled on site, including raw materials and finished products. I think in South Africa we all have to have this anyway because that's a regulated component of what we do. B, we have to have a risk assessment covering all potential sources of allergen cross-contamination. There needs to be an effort made within your system, your food safety system, that we've conducted this risk assessment of all cross-contamination points. This can be quite a tedious episode, and most people include it in their hazard analysis, which is fine, but we have to make sure that all cross-contamination points are identified. Once we've done the risk assessment, we have to identify and implement control measures to reduce or eliminate the risk of cross-contamination based on the outcome of the risk assessment. So yeah, a lot of sort of specific requirement to identify and implement control measures to make sure we reduce this. Once we have these control measures, we have to validate and verify control measures. The validation and verification of these control measures shall be implemented and maintained as documented information. So we have to have a policy and a procedure and a protocol and records of the validation and verification of the control measures. When more than one product is produced in the same production area that have different allergen profiles, verification testing shall be conducted at a frequency based on risk. This could include surface testing, air sampling, and or product testing. I think one would have to come and speak to us long term to look at your specific allergens if you do need some assistance with it. But frequency based on risk, yeah, this can be open to a lot of interpretation. If you're doing every single day, if you're doing something with peanuts and something without peanuts, the risk is there that cross-contamination could happen. So how we define, do we test it every day? If we're going to test that every day, you'll probably go out of business. You won't be able to manage that amount of cost. But what is risky? What's not risky? How often should we do it? When shouldn't we do it? Is once a year enough? Should we do it once a quarter? That's a big ask. And I think this is something that's going to have to be debated with, not just debated with, but actually thought out with a bunch of experienced food scientists and well thought out people, because there's a lot of interpretation required here with this clause, frequency based on risk. Clause number E, precautionary or warning labels shall only be used where the outcome of the risk assessment identifies allergen cross-contamination as a risk to the consumer. So when we conduct this and there is a risk, then we can put a warning label on there, even though all the necessary control measures have been effectively implemented. Applying warning labels does not exempt the organization from implementing the necessary allergen control measures or undertaking verification testing. So this is trying to get away from this pluck a label on it and just hope for the best. So I think a lot of people say this allergen management is so difficult, so they'll just tell them that it's made in a factory that contains peanuts. No, you can only do that once you've implemented control measures. You can't just put labeling on willy-nilly. You have to do a proper assessment, implement control measures, and if there's still a risk after doing all of that, then we can put a warning label on. Clause F, all personnel shall receive training in allergen awareness and specific training on allergen control measures associated with the area of work. All people need allergen training within your facility. I think most companies have allergen training in place. I think if you were to go to our website, we've got a free sort of allergen awareness training. But again, we can assist you with training if needed for your personnel. So get hold of us and we can help you out there. Clause G, the allergen management plan shall be reviewed at least annually. So every year you have to go and look at it and make sure it's still applicable. And following any significant changes that impact food safety, public recall or public withdrawal by the organization as a result of allergens, or when trends in industry show contamination of similar products relating to allergens. And that's quite a mouthful, but basically we have to be on the ball with what's going on regarding allergen contamination, allergen risks, and at all times we need to be aware of what's happening in our industry. Because if industry shows that there's contamination in the similar products we make, we have to revise our system to make sure our system is suitable to prevent cross-contamination and risks. The review shall include an evaluation of the effectiveness of the existing control measures. We're going to look at what we currently do to control it and the need for additional measures. Verification data shall be trended and used as input for the review. So there's a lot of information here that's requiring this review process. So I think in the greater scheme of things, when we develop an allergen management procedure, at the bottom of the procedure, we must say, this is how we're going to review it. These are the triggers for the review. This is the annual review, and this is the minutes of the meeting, and this is how we're going to conduct our review. We actually stipulate our procedure to do that review. And then the last one, H, for food category G. G is for the processing of feed and animal food. Where there is no allergen-related legislation for the country of sale pertaining to animal feed, this section of the scheme requirement may be indicated as not applicable unless a claim relating to the allergen status has been made on the animal feed. That's quite sort of self-descriptive there, but you can have it as not applicable if there's no legislation in there. But if you are making a claim regarding allergen status, one has to implement all of this in place. Clause number 7 relates to environmental monitoring. Environmental monitoring, they've also again elaborated on a lot. So in terms of environmental monitoring, we're looking at category B3, all of category C, category I, and category K. So those are the only categories that this is applicable to. If you're not one of those categories, you don't have to worry about this. But an organization shall have in place a risk-based environmental monitoring program for the relevant pathogens, foliage, and indicator organisms. You're not just testing Listeria or E. coli. We have to look at all of these different organisms, and it's a risk-based approach. So if there's a high risk, one would expect in a polony factory, or in a cooked processed meat factory, you're going to probably be doing a lot more environmental monitoring than you would in a flour mill, for instance. So a documented procedure for the evaluation of the effectiveness of all controls on preventing cross-contamination from the manufacturing environment. And this shall include, at minimum, the evaluation of microbiological controls present. So we have to do environmental and micro controls. There might be other controls as well that we want to test. And these shall comply with legal and customer requirements. So they're wanting to make sure that all of the control measures are tested. Typically speaking, we have swabs in place and we have final product testing in place. If final product testing is showing out of spec results, we've got to ask the question, is it our process, is it our raw materials, or is it some sort of abuse within the environment? And that will have to be sort of evaluated on a case-by-case basis. It's for this reason that we look at doing raw material analysis and final product analysis, because if we can confirm that our raw materials tend to be in a very good working order, and we've got good swab results in our process, you know, and poor finished product testing, we would have to, you know, having all these results at hand are going to help us identify and pinpoint where the problem is. So effectively, we have to just document this and create a hell of a lot of information out of microbiological data to specify where in our process we've gone wrong. This is obviously a challenge depending on the type of business you're in. Some businesses make a lot of product, have a little bit of extra money available as an overhead, and can afford to do quite a bit of testing. Other people do not have that luxury, and as a result don't have the financial backing to do it. So we have to be smart about how we do it. So again, there's quite a lot of potential consultation required. If you do have questions, let us know, and we can definitely help you with trying to put a frugal system in place to evaluate the effectiveness of controls. But essentially, all controls that you have in place, you need to evaluate to ensure that they're effective, and the more testing we do, the better, because it's going to help us eliminate the things that are right and allow us to focus on maybe the areas of concern. Data of the environmental monitoring activities, including regular trend analysis. So if we're doing FSSC 22000, we need to have trend analysis of results. And the environmental monitoring program shall be reviewed for continued effectiveness. So they've again included this whole review process for effectiveness and suitability at least annually, and more often if required, including when the following triggers occur. We have to review it frequently. It's a very important thing to do because this is something that gives us good insight into what's going on. So when do we do this review? Either annually or one of these conditions are met. If there's a significant change relating to product, process, or legislation, we must do a review. Maybe when the process meets standards, standards 885 came out, they changed the requirement for the stereo testing. We'd have to review this in light of the stereo requirement. We'd review it. When no positive test results have been obtained over an extended period of time. This is also quite an interesting one. Don't believe that when everything's said everything's fine, that it's actually all fine. If you're testing all the time and you never have a bad result, we must question, why do we not have a bad result? And we might have to look at where we're testing, what we're testing, and try and find a few bad results, because the likelihood of you never having a bad result, thinking of something like drain testing, if you're testing drains for the whole year and you never get a listeria positive result, either you're super special or you're just not actually testing the drain, because listeria is in drains. So yeah, when there's no positive testing results over an extended period of time, we have to actually question our sampling procedures and our monitoring program. Trend in out of specification micro results. So if we're having a number of out of specification micro results all the time, both or relating to both intermediate and finished products linked to environmental monitoring, we must re-look at this whole program if we keep on having out-of-spec micro results. The challenge with out-of-spec micro results is, did we implement suitable non-conformances and corrective actions? Because if we are doing our non-conformance system properly and we still have these out-of-spec results, then there's a problem somewhere and we'll have to revise the process to try and address the root causes properly. A repeat detection of pathogens during routine environmental monitoring. So if we're doing hand swabs all the time and we're always having issues with E. coli popping up or Staph aureus popping up, or we keep on doing drain swabs and it's always listeria, we're going to question our program, because clearly it's not, the result is showing that we're not addressing the issue. And the way we're handling these results and the way we're addressing it is not necessarily appropriate. And then lastly, when there are alerts, recalls or withdrawals relating to products produced by the organization. So the minute I might do a recall because of listeria in a pate that I make, I need to question, if I found it in my product, why did we not identify it in the environment or within the process in this product previously? And so we might increase the frequency. We might test a variety of other products just to make sure that we've addressed the risks. So those triggers are a big mouthful. It means as managers, when you're managing this type of system, you would need to really be on your toes about analyzing your data, because there could be a very quick sort of indication that we might need to change our system, update it, and improve it. So that's environmental monitoring in a nutshell. If you do need some assistance with this, let us know, because I think we've had quite a lot of experience with a variety of different businesses, and yeah, the balance between doing enough, doing too much, and not doing enough is a very fine line. The 8th additional requirement is food safety and quality culture. We've been talking about quality, food safety culture for a long time. It's been something that's been mentioned, and the FSSC has aligned their standard to make sure that we do something about food safety and quality culture. In accordance with, and in addition to clause 5.1 of ISO 22000, as part of the organization's commitment to cultivating a positive food safety and quality culture, Senior management shall establish, implement and maintain a food safety and quality culture objective as part of the management system that should normally be documented in some sort of policy. And the following elements shall be addressed as a minimum. So we have to address communication, training, employee feedback and engagement, and performance measurement of defined activities covering all sections of the organization impacting on food safety and quality. So effectively, we've got some sort of management commitment to implementing some sort of food safety and quality culture. We're going to identify what objectives we're going to address. And then for each one of these elements, we need to describe what will be done to improve the food safety and quality culture. So for communication, what are we going to do within our communication of our organization to make sure that the agenda of quality and culture, or quality and safety culture, is being pushed to the forefront? Do we have notifications, signage, training, how we talk to people? There's a whole host of ways that we can implement this, but effectively we need to put formalized processes in place to try and drive a food safe and quality culture within our organization. And at a minimum, so you can go crazy, you can add a whole lot of things on top of this, but at a minimum we need to keep these 4 points in mind. The objectives shall be supported by a documented food safety and quality culture plan. We have to develop a plan with targets and timelines and included in the management review and continuous improvement process of the management system. So we need to develop a plan and we need to implement the plan, and that plan must make sure that it achieves the goals of food safety and quality culture. And we're going to make sure that at the management review time, we're going to review the food safety and quality culture plan, and we're going to look at all the data that comes in to say that it's in place or not. And this is obviously going to be supportive of our whole continuous improvement of our business, our system, our processes. This is a big mouthful. You're going to have to watch this space because Sirius has been developing a whole food safety and quality culture system, and I think that this is something that we would love to work with you guys to assist in building something that can be relatively simplistic, but be able to assist in developing this culture and safety and help you not necessarily just comply to the requirements for audit purposes, but to actually get the nitty-gritty of doing food safety and doing quality in the organization. The last additional requirement that we're going to cover today, number 9, is regarding quality control. So this is where FSSC has said everyone that wants to have an FSSC certificate, you need to implement this as an additional requirement, and quality is an important aspect. We don't just care about safe food, we care about good quality food. The organization shall, in addition to and aligned with clause 5.2 and 6.2 of ISO, establish, implement and maintain a quality policy and quality objectives. So this is in addition to the food safety policy and objectives. Objectives most likely must also be measurable. It doesn't say measurable here, but measurable is a very good requirement. One should establish, implement and maintain quality parameters in line with finished product specifications for all products and product groups within the scope of certification, including product release that addresses quality control and testing. In addition to and aligned with clause 9.1 and 9.3 of ISO 22000-2018, undertake analysis and evaluation of the results of the quality control parameters as defined under 259A2 above, and include it as input for the management review. The management review needs to look at quality parameters now, not just safety parameters. We need to know that we're making good quality products. We need to monitor, measure, analyze, and evaluate and report at management review the status of the quality of our products. In addition to and aligned with Clause 9.2 of ISO 22000-2018, we need to include quality elements as defined in this clause within the scope of the internal audit. So the internal audit needs to be made broader so that we can look at all the quality aspects of your product and business. In terms of quality control procedures, including for unit, weight and volume, we need these procedures. They must be established and implemented to ensure products meet the applicable customer and legal requirements. This shall include a program for calibration and verification of equipment used for quality and quantity control. So, this probably comes a lot to looking at the, I would say, scales and laboratory equipment. Maybe you're measuring pH, maybe you're measuring conductivity, maybe you're having just to weigh things, temperature control. Anything we're using, not just from a safety aspect, but from a quality aspect, needs to be calibrated and verified to make sure that we are measuring correctly. Line startup and changeover procedures shall be established and implemented to ensure products, including packaging and labeling, meet applicable customer and legal requirements. This includes having controls in place to ensure labeling and packaging from the previous run has been removed from the line. So this is all about making sure that we don't fill product into the wrong packet. So again, it's just around the packaging side. So we need to put in place a procedure and applicable records to make sure that we prove that the procedure is in place, to make sure that we manage that aspect. That is the nine additional requirements today. I don't know if any of you have questions about any of those. I think it's quite a mouthful. I would recommend that all of you read through the additional requirements again and send us through questions where we can maybe help. We're here to assist where we can. But yeah, there's quite a lot of work when we start looking at the food safety and quality culture, and when we look at quality control. There's a hell of a lot of work that's going to be needed to define a system that's going to be simplistic and work for you. Obviously, food defense and food fraud, that's been going on for a while, but again, there's ways that we need to maybe refine that. And yeah, if you've got any questions, let me know. Get to us and let's see where we can assist you. Next week, on the 20th of April, we're going to do the version 6 additional requirements. So we're going to do requirements from 10 to 18. We'll look at transport, storage and warehousing, hazard control and measurements for preventing cross-contamination, PRP verification, product design, health status, equipment management, food loss and waste, communication, and requirements for organizations, multi-site certification. So yeah, if you have any other questions, let me know. I don't see any in our chat at the moment. What we're going to do is we're going to create an online quiz. It will be found on our website, serious.co.za. And these quizzes, I'm not sure if they're up at the moment. Hopefully they're going to be up in the next little while. When they are up, all 3 quizzes must be completed, or a single quiz which is going to cover all 3 videos that we've got online. And then based on the test written on this quiz that we write, we'll be able to give you a certificate for this training to say that you have been made aware of the FSSC requirements. Cool. So there's no other questions. If anyone has any questions, let me know. Feel free to send us an email with 1 or 2 questions, and we can also include that in next week's webinar. I wish you all well. Hope everything goes well, and looking forward to see you all next week. Thanks very much, everyone.